We will be starting briefly. I'm just waiting for the on-air light to come on. Good afternoon. This is the November 9th, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment regular meeting. My name is Matt Perry, and I am chair of this board. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of quorum.
Board members Hutchins, Ingram, and Wang will be absent this evening. Board member Callahan.
Present.
Grans Korsch.
Present.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Chair Perry.
Here?
Vice Chair Softly.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Here.
We have 6 members present.
So we do have quorum. Let the record reflect that. With that, we'll proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, available at lims.minneapolis.gov. We're going to have I'd like to, as part of new business, do a presentation on our location at the end of the meeting. So I'd just like to add that to the agenda. We'll be moving to some different digs during the 2024 year as they redo this area. So with that amended agenda, would there be someone to move that? It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes and the agenda is approved. I believe all the board members have seen a copy of the minutes from the October 26, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? If you weren't here at the last meeting, you should abstain. We have 2 abstentions, and that motion passes. The minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustment October 26, 2023 meeting are approved. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communications?
Chair Perry, members of the board, there are 2 communications this evening. One is that there has been appeal of the board's decision from the last meeting on 5413 Woodlawn Boulevard. That was the side yard setbacks after reconstruction, after demoing beyond a certain point. That will be going to the November 28th Business Inspections, Housing and Zoning Committee. The second is that we have had no complete items for the November 30th Board of Adjustment, so that meeting will be canceled.
Okay. So everybody gets the rest of November off. Thanks for those updates. A reminder to applicants and others, if you're going to speak at the public hearing, please sign in on the sheet over on that corner there and speak clearly into the microphone. If you've not signed in, you can do so on your way out. Also to applicants and others, please contact staff after the hearing with any questions regarding your project. And if you have something like this, please turn it off or turn it on silent so you don't disturb today's proceedings. Let's review the agenda. I will read the agenda number and the address of the project and state whether it's slated for consent, continuance, withdrawal, return, or discussion. Just to talk about discussion items, what they are. They're items which the board will take public testimony, deliberate on, and make a decision. After the public testimony has been heard for each particular discussion item, I will close the public hearing for that agenda item. Once I close the public hearing for an item, no additional public testimony will be taken, but staff may be asked to address board questions. After the public hearing for an item is closed, board members will then discuss and act on motions. And the chair does not vote except in the case of a tie. So we have a single land use item on our agenda today. It's item number 5, 1501 Johnson Street Northeast, and this is a discussion item. We have no consent items, so there's nothing to consider there. And before we get going on agenda item number 5, I'd just like to point out that this item is a request for non-conforming rights, a certificate for non-conforming rights. It's not a variance request or an appeal of the zoning administrator, which have different findings of fact. Findings of fact for certificates of non-conforming rights hinge on when and if there were lawfully establishment of these rights, and if there was a one-year discontinuation of the approved usage associated with these rights. And the staff will get into the details of this as you've seen in your staff packets. And with that, Mr. Kohlhaas.
Thank you, Chair Perry and members of the board. As you just said, this is a request for a certificate of non-conforming use, in this case for a motor vehicle storage lot for the property at 1501 Johnson Street Northeast. As Chair Perry just mentioned, this is not a variance. This is not a appeal of a determination of the zoning administrator, which are the two more common types of applications that the board sees. So I'll spend a little bit of time going into the zoning code foundation or background on certificates of non-conforming use. So part of this starts just looking at, in this case, a portion of the use table. This is from the current zoning code, and for zoning purposes, when we're talking about uses, we're talking about uses as delineated in the zoning code, which might not be the same way that someone would be talking about the use of a property generally, but for zoning purposes, we have to work within this framework. And I've highlighted a couple of particular uses and use categories that are more relevant in this case. So that highlight towards the middle, you can see there is a warehousing and storage use group that is highlighted, and then right below that is contractor yard is also highlighted. So a contractor yard is a specific use delineated in the zoning code within the warehousing and storage use group. And there's some other language that I've highlighted that kind of describes that use group and list contractor's yard as a specific example. And then towards the bottom, you can see vehicle storage is a highlighted use group. Again, calling out some other language from another section of the code that lists motor vehicle storage lots as an example of a specific use within the vehicle storage use. So this is just a portion of the use table. There's lots of other uses outside of these two broad production and transportation categories, but just to kind of ground this in that framework of the uses in the zoning code. When we're talking about non-conforming uses, I'm paraphrasing, we don't need to go through all of this language, but a non-conforming use being something that is not, it's a use of a specific property that is not permitted in the zoning district that property is located in. And when you have a legal non-conforming use, that means the use was established at some point in the past when it was allowed, and then the zoning code changed to no longer allow that use. And a legal non-conforming use is allowed to remain as long as they are not expanding or intensifying. And there's also some circumstances around when non-conforming rights can be lost. As Chair Perry said, if the use is discontinued for 1 year or more, then the rights to that non-conforming use are lost in that context. A certificate of non-conforming use is for if there is a dispute about the legality of a non-conforming use on a particular property. This is something that a property owner or another interested party, can request for their property. Again, this is not a variance. It's not subject to the same findings as for variances. It's not an appeal of a zoning administrator determination, so it's not an argument about whether or not city staff are interpreting and applying the code correctly. It's just a question of whether or not there are existing effective non-conforming rights to a particular use as presented by the applicants and as classified by city staff. I guess before I go on, just to reiterate some specific language in the code that talks about when a certificate of non-conforming use can be granted. It may be granted when the Zoning Board of Adjustment establishes that the use was legally established and has retained legal non-conforming rights. If the applicant does not establish the required facts, no certificate shall be issued. Where the loss of non-conforming rights is apparent due to vacancy, The property owner may rebut the presumption of abandonment only by presenting clear and convincing evidence that the discontinuance of the nonconforming use for the specified period was due to circumstances beyond the property owner's control, and the property owner shall bear the burden of proof. A couple of other relevant pieces of context specifically for changes of nonconforming use, and again, this is just lifted straight from the zoning code. When there is a nonconforming use on a property and it is then changed to a conforming use, so a use that is permitted in the zoning district that property is located in, then the nonconforming rights to the previous use are no longer in effect after that point. If there is a legal nonconforming use established on a property and the property owner wants to change to a different nonconforming use, that requires a different type of land use application for a change of nonconforming use, which requires a public hearing and approval of the City Planning Commission. So there is a designated process for something like that, which is not what is in play today. So with that background, to focus on the matter at hand again, this is property at 1501 Johnson Street Northeast, and the request is for a certificate of nonconforming use for a motor vehicle storage lot. That's the use of the property as brought forward by the applicant, and city staff have made the determination that the use is classified as a motor vehicle storage lot. Subject property, it is an irregular kind of teardrop-shaped parcel off Johnson Street. It has a lot area of just under 100,000 square feet. There is a 1 to 2 story building on the property. They have a paved parking area near the street, and the remainder of the property exterior is an unpaved kind of parking or storage areas to how it's been used historically. To go into some of the history, which we'll dive into in more detail, the principal use of the property was as a contractor's yard from 1990 through at least 2018, though the use of the property since 2018 till now is kind of a central question at the heart of today's application, so I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The property has access from Johnson Street and is surrounded by a mix of different uses, like there's a park across the street, there's some low-density residential neighborhoods nearby. The quarry is just to the northeast, and you have I-35W that runs across a couple of sides of this. The current property owner is Minneapolis Park Property LLC. They are the applicants for the Certificate of Nonconforming Use. They are managed and represented by Dale Zorb. This is a private entity without a known affiliation to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. It's just a coincidence that the name is a little similar. And this property was previously owned under a separate entity known as Building Restoration Corporation, which for all intents and purposes is the same applicant in this case, just to kind of change in the name or structure of the ownership. The current zoning map for the property as of July 1st of this year, when the city completed their latest, adopted the new zoning ordinance and zoning map, this property was rezoned into the CM2 Corridor Mixed Use Zoning District, and it's also located in the Transit 10 Built Form Overlay District. So now to get into the history, which is relevant for the proposal here, and we can start back in 1963 when the city adopted a new zoning code and map at that time, and this property was rezoned into the M1-2 light manufacturing district, which allowed a number of different uses that were permitted and conditional. Two of the most relevant ones are a permitted use being storage of materials, goods, or products. This was not specific to indoor or outdoor storage, and there were some specific standards for what the storage needed to look like in the 63 code. And another permitted use was a contractor's yard, which was part of a broader use category, including contractors, offices, and shops. In 1990, this property was purchased by the applicant as Building Restoration Corporation for use, and these are, I think, the applicant's words from their written materials, a contractor's yard as well as motor vehicle storage and outdoor storage. And again, a contractor's yard is a permitted use in the M1-2 district in 1990. For that contractor's yard use, this is not something that was explicitly defined in the 1963 codes. It didn't have a specific zoning code definition when it started at this property in 1990, but when the city adopted later zoning codes in 99 and this year, 2023, we have an explicit definition of a contractor's yard, which is an establishment providing general contracting or building construction services and which involves outdoor storage of machinery or equipment. So the presence of outdoor storage is a defining feature of a contractor's yard as a use. The outdoor storage is inherent to that use. So when the contractor's yard is established as the principal use of a property, the outdoor storage is inextricably tied to that principal use as a contractor's yard. In the 63 code and other parts of the more recent zoning codes, there are some references to storage generally as its own use. It's not specific to outdoor storage. There are specific standards in most parts of the city. Outdoor storage is not functionally something that's permitted, including on this property for the last several years. But again, in this case, it had that established use as a contractor's yard, so all the outdoor storage was inherent to that use from staff's perspective. So moving forward in time, throughout the 90s, it continues as a contractor's yard, and then in 1999, the city adopts a new zoning code and the new zoning map. This property is rezoned to the I-1 Light Industrial Zoning District. Contractor's yard was not a permitted use in that I-1 district in 1999, and so this became a non-conforming use of the property, a legal non-conforming use of this property in 1999. And here's a photo from the applicant. It's from a few years later, but kind of showing the conditions of the property a little bit after this. Fast forwarding again, and we get to 2016 and 2017, the property changes ownership. Again, it's still the same people who are owning and managing the property, but the name does change and it's no longer owned under Building Restoration Corp. And the applicant has provided a couple of leases throughout this period where they lease portions of the exterior of the property for things like outdoor parking or storage of commercial vehicles. Again, another photo from the applicant. Then November 2017 through April 2018, there is another lease to a tenant, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, Liban or Liban Express Incorporated, a lease for use as a contractor's office and yard is part of what is called out in the lease provided by the applicant. This is the last documented use of the property as a contractor's yard as far as has been presented to staff as part of this application. After that, to spring of 2019, the property owner and their agents submitted some land use applications which were approved by the city for multifamily residential reconstruction on the property. That included a rezoning to add the industrial living overlay district, which is not relevant for this matter, but does change the zoning history of the property. Those land use applications for an apartment building that were approved by the city, their permits were never issued, as far as I know, or construction never began at least, and the land use application approvals for the apartments eventually expired. Around the same time in April 2019, that's 1 year after the end of that last contractor's yard lease, and so that is when, as far as we know, the contractor's yard non-conforming rights expired in April of 2019, and then from then until November of 2022, we don't have much of any record that is really relevant to this request here. And again, another photo from the applicants from November of 2018. In December of 2022, the applicant has provided a copy of a lease to a tenant, 11th Hour Recovery LLC, for use as, and quoting from the lease, general office, sales, repair shop, and outdoor storage. The applicant's submitted materials also refer to this as an asset repossession service, which collects vehicles that have been repossessed and stores the vehicles at the property until they are driven to auction or picked up by the owners. I mentioned this before, city staff have determined that this use of the property is classified as a motor vehicle storage lot. Motor vehicle storage lot does not have an explicit definition in the zoning code, which is not uncommon for delineated uses in the zoning code, but in the bottom right, there's kind of an excerpt from the zoning code that I had before that shows that vehicle storage use group, and it calls out a motor vehicle storage lot as an example of a specific use within the vehicle storage use group, separate from use as a contractor's yard, which is a warehousing and storage use. And then earlier this year, just to close the loop on the zoning history, the property was rezoned to CM2 corridor mixed use as part of the latest new city zoning code and zoning map. So just to go back to the use table again to highlight, these are two totally separate uses as far as zoning code is concerned. It was a contractor's yard, and then it was a non-conforming contractor's yard, and then there is evidence that eventually shows it stopped being a contractor's yard, or where we no longer have verification that it was used as a contractor's yard. And again, the storage component of that contractor's yard is inherently tied to that. So we don't see taking non-conforming rights for outdoor storage as a use, because that's not the use that was permitted and considered the legal non-conforming use of the property. This is just to summarize those really most kind of central milestones in this timeline. The last use of the property's contractor's yard, the expiration of the non-conforming rights a year later, and then the establishment of the motor vehicle storage lot use. I've gone over in the staff report, there's a number of findings, and I've already touched on most of those, but just to catch the other ones that I haven't talked about explicitly. Finding number 6, there's no other available evidence as provided by the applicant or from city or other public records, clearly and convincingly demonstrating that discontinuation of the non-conforming contractor's yard use exceeding a 1-year period was entirely outside of the property owner's control. Finding number 7, after the non-conforming rights of the contractor's yard expired, any subsequent use of the property would be limited to as allowed by the applicable zoning ordinance in the zoning district at that time, and that did change a little bit over the last couple of years. I mentioned before, there is a specific use for wanting to change a non-conforming use, and that's not something that the property owners have pursued over since the contractor's yard use was no longer happening. Finding number 9, again, a motor vehicle storage lot not permitted in the I-1 zoning district or the current CM2 zoning district. Finding number 10, reiterating some of those points from the zoning code, that the property owner bears the burden of proof for a certificate of non-conforming use. Staff have found that the non-conforming rights to use as a contractor's yard have expired, and staff finds that available evidence does not factually establish that the motor vehicle storage lot use was lawfully established. In conclusion, staff recommendation is for denial based on those findings that I've talked about and are articulated more thoroughly in the staff report. There was one written public comment which was received, I think, after the staff report was published, but that should have been forwarded along for your consideration in this matter. This concludes my presentation. I'll stand for questions.
Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Kohlhaas. Are there any questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Thank you, Mr. Kohlhaas. I know this isn't a policy question, but I'm curious, what is the policy distinction between a motor vehicle storage lot and a contractor's yard?
Let me see if I can find the definition. Chair Perry, Board Member Softly, Vice Chair Softly. Contractor's yard does have a specific use or a specific definition in the zoning code, so ultimately we are deferring to that, and this talks about providing general contracting or building construction services, and it does have this clause about outdoor storage of machinery or equipment. A motor vehicle storage lot doesn't have a specific use, but in the use table, it is sort of broken out into these two different use groups. And so we are looking at if they are just storing vehicles on the property, but it's not tied to a business that they are also providing contractor services, then that would be kind of a distinguishing feature, as opposed to if it is a contractor's yard and they have company vehicles that they're also storing on the property or parking on the property, that is inherently tied to that use as a contractor's yard. So we're not going to consider that a separate use. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It gets close. It doesn't. What I'm trying to distinguish is sort of, the difference between, say, the intensity or the type of storage of the vehicles. I mean, again, I know it's not a policy question before us today, but I was curious because it seems like a contractor's yard is going to have daily usage as a matter of course, whereas a storage vehicle facility may not have daily usage, but I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's policy, and it was going to help me frame sort of my understanding for how the use may have changed.
There is also a distinction between a parking lot as a principal use, as an accessory use, and that does, I think, refer to kind of daily use of, people driving their own vehicles and parking for a temporary period of time, or it's, for their own apartment or their own business or something, as opposed to more long-term storage of vehicles, for example, as part of an asset repossession service. The applicants might be able to speak more to the actual business model here. I would defer to Mr. Ellis if he wants to add anything. I don't know if we sort of have a ranking of these in terms of one being more intense than the other, but there is a distinction between what zoning districts these are permitted in. And it's not the case here that this is currently in that CM2 zoning district, which is more commercial in nature. Primarily, it was in the I1 district, which is a low-intensity industrial, and these uses were both not permitted in the I1 district. They were deemed too intense, for lack of a better term, and were reserved for those more intense industrial districts like I2 or I3 that we used to have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Claus.
Chair Perry, Board Member Softly, or Vice Chair Softly, I apologize. The conceptual difference primarily is a contractor's yard is expected more to have the materials associated with it rather than necessarily a fleet of vehicles, although there could be a fleet of vehicles, as was the case for this one. But usually when we see that, we're thinking landscaping companies, et cetera, that may store their gravel, may store timbers on site, may store concrete, things along that line that they then go out and to do their work. Lumber as well. Electrical contractors will often have large spools of different things, et cetera, versus automobile uses tend to be clumped together, whether that's, even in the past, it was a form of, we had transportation uses and automobile services uses. Some of that's kind of been collapsed together now, and they are differentiated, and automobile-focused uses are treated differently generally throughout. That's kind of the policy basis. I'd have to go into more detail. We could bring up the comprehensive plan or whatnot, but that's sort of the use delineation between them. And we do tend to regulate automobile uses more heavily. However, as Mr. Kohlhaas noted, they're essentially identical in terms of where they're allowed in the prior zoning and currently. So.
Yes.
What inspired the application? Why was there attention calls to the change?
Chair Perry, Board Member Smeeker-Rover, I believe this came through enforcement, where I'm not sure if it was a complaint specifically, or, but ultimately there is a zoning inspector that issued some enforcement orders, noted that based on the property or the zoning district, that I think this came from like March of this year, and so at the time it was in the I1 industrial zoning district, which still did not allow a motor vehicle storage lot. And this certificate of nonconforming use is an option for a property owner to potentially bring the property into compliance without actually changing the use.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, because this is very helpful to have the highlighted portions, because I was concerned about table 545.1 and that obviously it didn't say no towing business is allowed, but it had the other components of which this business is using. So my question, I guess, is a process question. Was this chart ever sent to the owners? This is a question, I guess, for planning to understand. What notification was done in 2023? Because this chart is pretty clear to me that it's an unacceptable use. So what was the process used to get that information out to the owner?
Chair Perry, Board Member Grants Korsch, so I mentioned this a couple times, but the timing is a little unusual in that this table I put in my slide just for ease of kind of demonstration, but actually when this first became an issue, we were dealing with the previous zoning code because we had a new zoning code on July 1st of this year. So we had a table much like this one, but organized a little bit differently, and I had many of these same categories like contractor's yard and motor vehicle storage lots. So a little bit different format, but generally the same content. And I mentioned this coming out of zoning enforcement, and so the zoning inspector would send an enforcement letter to the property owner, and as part of that, they will call out specific violations. And in this case, the violation that was identified is a use that is not permitted on the property in the zoning district that it's located in. And so it would say, I think there were a few different enforcement letters that I think were included in the attachments that would say, the use of the property as a vehicle storage lot or towing service or whatever is not permitted. It would have some zoning code section references. We wouldn't necessarily be mailing them a copy of this table or something, but that's one way that something like this is identified to a property owner. And then, I've been in touch with Mr. Zorb over the past several months as we have sort of identified this application as being the route they wanted to pursue, and that included some discussion about these things. Applicants, I think, as part of their own submitted application materials, included some copies of old zoning code sections, including the old I-1 tables, so I think they were aware of this, even if we did not send them that table specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I understand. Okay, thank you. So thank you also for the presentation. It was really helpful to see it laid out like this. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly the two pieces that you've highlighted for us. So the contractor yard, the original use was carried over as a non-conforming legal use, but the non-conforming use before us today as a certificate is a motor vehicle storage lot. So I'm curious, I mean, there's also the question of whether or not it was whether or not the use has continued enough to where they still have the non-conforming use. The question I have is, with the motor vehicle lot, if they're able to successfully show that they've continued to carry that use forward, would it be a non-conforming legal use under the 1963 zoning? Like, was it originally, would that use be a permitted use? And I was looking, and I really appreciate all of the zoning, iterations of zoning that you included in the packet, but I just want to make sure that there's a couple, it's obviously not included because that was, I think, not something that they were considering when they wrote the zoning code, so wondering where that would fall within the zoning administrator interpretation.
Yeah, Chair Perry, Board Member Callahan, I think how staff have been thinking about this, or how we have sort of reached our conclusion that underlines our recommendation, is the use that was first allowed under the 1963 code and first established on this property in 1990 when they purchased the property is a contractor's yard. That's not the entirety of how the applicant has described their use of the property at that time, but that contractor's yard use, including the definition that I brought up a couple of times, does, we think, pretty fairly encompass what the use of the property was, and that includes outdoor storage. So the way the property is being used now, as staff sees, is fundamentally different, that it's no longer a contractor's yard. It is a motor vehicle storage lot. They have described it as an asset repossession service. And so that is part of the issue from staff's perspective, is that there is not one through line that leads to establishing this use today as a motor vehicle storage lot. There's the details about when exactly the contractor's yard use discontinued and when those non-conforming rights expired, but either way, there's several years of a gap that, in terms of in the evidence that has been presented to us. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly.
No, it does.
But that's how
Yeah.
have come to our conclusion.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see none. So with that, let's open the public hearing. I just want to say that there's a lot of information that has been provided. I looked at the staff packet. It's 226 pages long. So you can assume that we have read through that material. And whoever is going to speak on behalf of this application, I'd like you to highlight what you'd like to highlight. Staff spent about 20 minutes on it, so I'll give you 20 minutes to respond to that. And if there are multiple people who are going to present, you can divide your time up in that 20-minute chunk.
Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to express my gratitude to each member of your board for your dedicated service to our community. My name is Dale Zorb, and I stand before you today as a concerned business owner and local employer who has always strived to be a responsible steward of my property and to create employment opportunities and contribute to the economic well-being of our community. Some history on this property that is across the freeway from the entrance to the Quarry Shopping Center. This property was part of the Johnson Street Quarry from 1930s through 1958. Thereafter, the property was used as a city dump for building construction debris from downtown Minneapolis. As such, its environmental history and soil conditions limit what can be built on the site. Later, it was used as a contractor's yard. Today, I'm here to seek a certificate of nonconforming use that will allow me to continue exercising my rights as the property owner in Minneapolis. I own the property in the name of Building Restoration Corporation, also known as BRC, from 1990 to 2016, from which we restored many buildings in the city of Minneapolis, including this city hall exterior in 2020. The property from 2016 and onwards has been held in the name of Minneapolis Park Property LLC. From the time of my purchase in 1990 and until 1999, the property was zoned M1-2, which permitted the operation as a contractor's yard, which included vehicle storage and outdoor storage. However, after the 1999 zoning change by the city of Minneapolis, the property was rezoned I-1, a classification that no longer allowed for the contractor's yard, outdoor storage, or vehicle storage. Despite these changes, the property usage was grandfathered into the new zoning regulations, meaning that it maintained the right to continue its existing use. The use of the yard for outdoor storage and vehicle storage has been continuous since then. In December of 2022, I, as the manager of Minneapolis Park Properties, entered into a lease agreement with 11th Hour Recovery. This company operates as an asset repossession service and collects vehicles that have been repossessed and temporarily stores them at the property until they're driven to auction or picked up by their representative owners. Importantly, these vehicles are typically remain on the property for about a week. And in addition, the property is still used to store contractor equipment and trailers, including BRC. Steps have been taken to enhance the aesthetics of the property. A privacy fence has been installed along Johnson Street, ensuring that any visual impact of outdoor storage is minimized. In 2016, our attorneys at Fellhaber Larson prepared a legal memorandum on the property, and most recently, I had their firm, along with our staff, revise the memorandum. It's attached as part of the application, and it's really quite long. I don't know if you've had a chance to breeze through it. Anyway, the legal basis is rooted in the historical zoning classification for the property language of the current Minneapolis Code and the property's unbroken track record of maintaining outdoor storage for over 3 decades. Now let me address the city staff's alleged findings point by point to provide you with some additional content and clarification on each issue. I'm in agreement with findings number 1 and 2, if you want to check off from Alex's finding list. And finding number 3. And I agree with finding number 4, that it was, use of the property was a contractor's use, including outdoor storage, yes. For finding number 5, Alex says that we did not have contractor's yard continuation for a year period or more. And I do want to apologize to Alex because we didn't give him all the information that we had in our files. I had a prior legal intern prepare our application, and she did not find all the things that we had for, that bolster our case. And I'm going to go through some of them here. So these slides, when I see them here, does this come up on your computers as well? I assume so. Okay. Okay, these are lease agreements for a contract. When the company, Building Restoration, sold this to Minneapolis Park Properties, Building Restoration still leased the property, parts of the property. And then we extended this lease from 2017 to 2019. Okay, A-Star Concrete Pumping Company leases a portion of the property since March of 2017 and continuously to the present day. Okay, they own multiple concrete pumping equipment, and they do their washout here, and they are out pumping concrete during the day, and these come home to here at night, and they clean them up. And R&S Concrete changed their name to A-Star concrete pumping in 2017. But these, I'm just showing you now checks from every year from their lease, because their lease, I'm not faulting Alex for this, because the lease, I don't know, I've got the lease in here somewhere. The lease isn't for this whole period of time. They went on a month-to-month lease after the lease expired. But here's checks for 2017, this one for 2019, 2018, 19, 2020, 21, 22. These are monthly checks. I just had them send me one from each month, one from each year. 23. In addition to that exterior equipment and demonstrating and proving that this was used every year as a contractor's yard, we also have an amendment to the Liban Express lease, and they went on a month-to-month, which I think it says so right here on item number 1 here. Term of this lease should be month-to-month. And these are the vehicles, and of course you can see the trucks, vehicles, or trailer, or vehicles. 2017 building restoration vehicles in the yard from that lease, equipment, and there's dates from these photographs, have dates on them. And this is from, not the greatest picture, but from Google Earth, showing more vehicles on the site. And so there we go. So I guess the essence of whether or not we did not have a continuous use, I'm disputing by the photographic evidence and the leases and the cash checks. So that's basically most of finding number 5. And number 6 says no available evidence, which goes back to number 5. It's the same thing. And Alex's finding number 7 says it expired in 2019, but it didn't because we had a continuing use, as I demonstrated. Let's see. And you're finding number 8. So the application of nonconforming use corresponds to certifying my continued use as a property as a legal nonconforming use, even if the city were to outline the application as a motor vehicle storage lot, which the city admits lacks of clarity in the code as to this determination. I wish to underline that part of the contractor's yard use, storing vehicles, equipment, and machinery, is intrinsic to operations, and they are integral components of this nonconforming use. So contractors need vehicles and equipments to operate. Additionally, there's no clear determination within the code, so the clear interpretation cannot be fully subjective. If the city decides that a motor vehicle storage lot is not allowed in a contractor's yard, that would mean that a contractor could not store any of their equipment, trucks, or trailers. Additionally, it could potentially mean that clients couldn't park in front of their shops. This rationale that the staff has outlined, I think, does not make it practical, nor does it align with the prescribed and defined use of a contractor's yard, and it could set a dangerous precedent for other owners. Moreover, the absence of clear definitions within the current code necessitates an objective interpretation that aligns with standard industry practices and precedents in Minnesota. Finally, for his finding number 10, with these photographs today, and I can supplement or give the department the actual originals here, that we feel that we have provided the requisite burden of proof to substantiate our claim. So in conclusion, I am earnestly seeking the Zoning's Board of Approval for a favorable decision to accept a certificate of nonconforming use for the contractor's yard at 1501 Johnson Street and this would affirm my property's rightful status and grant continued availability to utilize the site for outdoor storage, particularly for the parking, towing, and storing of vehicles. Such an outcome would not only be valuable to our efforts in maintaining compliance with existing regulations, but would also allow us to contribute to the economic well-being of the community, reinforcing our commitment to the city's growth and prosperity. I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude for the honor of your time, and if you have any other questions, I'm prepared to take them now.
Thanks for your testimony. Any questions of Mr. Zorb? Yes, Mr. Sefley.
I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. Can you clarify if you provided the leases to Mr. Kohlhaas and to city staff, or is that something we're just seeing now today as part of the packet for the
I
first
think
time?
some of them I think I have. Yes, some of them I have, but not all of them.
Okay.
So, and I certainly can supplement. Sure.
The ones up to 2017, Libanani was the last.
Who are you?
Provided. Sorry,
are you?
I'm just helping him.
Yeah,
I'm a staff
so you
member.
need to give your name and address for the
Gabriel
record.
Richardson, I'm 2833 34th Avenue South, Minneapolis, Minnesota,
Yep,
55406.
thanks.
Okay, apologize, but I'm just helping him with this, just to respond to your question, Vice Chair Southly. So our prior intern gave the leases up to 2017. We could not find in our records 2017, 18, 19, up to 2022, except for the lease that we have with our current tenants for part of the property. But we did end up finding the other leases, and we actually did provide in the original application pictures and photographic evidence that provides testimony to the activities that were done on the property that were, correspond to contracting activity. Apologize, Chair.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. I certainly understand about A-Star and the concrete, but what I don't understand is on page 49 and 50 of your own submittal, there's like hundreds of cars, and I fail to see where they really do match the issue of almost 7 different areas of which aren't appropriate. So there's hundreds of cars there that are listed that aren't construction vehicles. They are not contractors. They're not plumbing trucks. They're not A-Star concrete. So I'm trying to understand how much is actually contractor use and how much is vehicle storage. Do you have a percentage of your property that?
Yeah, I would say 20% is contractors, and the remaining would be vehicle storage.
So 80% is the vehicles. Okay, that's.
Of the yard space, not the, we have to take the building out too, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Mr. Zorb? I see none. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? Yep.
Hello, Chair. Should I repeat my name again, or?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for jumping in. So my name, as I said, Gabriel Richardson. I'm just helping Mr. Zorb with this application today. I am a resident of Minneapolis. So just a few points of clarification. When the applicant submitted the certificate for nonconforming use, it was for a contractor's yard use and not necessarily what the city is mentioning, which is the motor vehicle usage, because the property actually has many uses. One is obviously our tenants right here sitting in front of us, but we also, or BRC still uses the space for certain contracting activities, and obviously you just heard that we have a third tenant, a concrete tenant that uses the space as well. So I think there was a mistake there, or a lack of clarification, that it's actually for the contractor's yard usage, just because the property has been using that space for that specific usage for since the moment that BRC purchased it and then transferred over to Minneapolis Park Properties. One other aspect that I heard just today is that there really is a parsing that the city is making between what is actually motor vehicle storage and what is what you can use in the contractor's yard. And by Mr. Kohlhaas's own admission, there isn't really a clear delineation because it's not necessarily defined within the code presently what a motor vehicle storage use looks like. So we're going off of what we've always used it. I'm using we in the royal we, but as a contractor's yard. So I just want to make that clarification because there's that confusion right there. And, you know, I think Mr. Zorb is still acting under the presumption that whatever he's been doing and the activities that he's been leasing this property off are his rights that were granted to him when he initially purchased the property. So just that little clarification, and I'm happy to take more questions.
Any questions of Mr. Richardson? I see. Oh, yes, Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what is the nature of your representation of Mr. Zorb?
So I work for Building Restoration Corporation. I am also a law student. I've been helping him for 2 years with certain aspects, and that's my representation.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think there are any other questions. Thanks for your testimony.
Well, let me just clarify, I am not an attorney, and any advice that I'm saying here is not considered legal advice. I'm just providing Mr. Zorb with strategy and also just helping him out as
Thanks
a friend
for the
as well.
clarification. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? Anyone to speak against it? I'll close the public hearing now. I have a question of staff. It's more a clarification. I thought I read in the staff report that the zoning administrator had deemed this to be a motor vehicle storage area, most like a motor vehicle storage facility. And so, since we're not appealing the decision of that, that's where we are, what your determination is based on is that determination of the zoning administrator, calling it a motor vehicle storage facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chair Perry, just to kind of reiterate on some of what the applicant and their representatives have said. I mentioned before in response to a question that there was the enforcement letters that went out earlier this year that identified uses of the property, and that included, as I think the language was, vehicle storage. And reading from the applicant's submitted materials here, I'm selectively quoting, but for over 30 years, the property at 1501 Johnson Street has been in continuous use for outdoor storage and vehicle storage. That's after going into context of past use of the property as a contractor's yard. And another memo provided by the applicants, it's this fellow Haber Larson, attorneys at law, quotes from the first page regarding the ability for the current owner and any future owners of the property located at 1501 Johnson Street Northeast to use the property as outdoor storage. So that also doesn't exactly line up with the motor vehicle storage lot, but from staff's perspective, we are looking at, what the zoning inspector identified, the evidence that's been presented, how the applicants are describing their own current use and what they are looking to protect in terms of their rights. And we had made that determination that it was a motor vehicle storage lot, and that is how we described it in the staff report. I would defer to Mr. Ellis if he has any other background he wants to provide here, but I would also clarify this is not an application for an appeal of a determination of the zoning administrator. It's a certificate of non-compliance.
Yeah, I was just trying to make sure that the lack of clarity is actually there. It was made clear by the zoning administrator based on the evidence that they had before them that this was a motor vehicle storage lot. And so we're going from that point forward. Is that true, Mr. Ellis?
Chair Perry, I I believe so. I'm not sure I'm getting the exact gist of the question, but I mean, yeah, the question before us today is essentially the certificate of nonconforming use for a motor vehicle storage lot. We determined that it is classified as a motor vehicle storage lot. If somebody came and requested to do this use, we would call it a motor vehicle storage lot as opposed to towing. I think maybe some of the initial confusion came from our initial orders were written for a towing lot, which is a subset of kind of the same category. It's not technically a towing lot, but since it's not a towing service, as you would think of the ones that do tow and then you come by. But it does fall under that same category generally in the sense that you see like impound lot, motor vehicle storage, so it's in that larger use table, if that makes
Yes.
sense. So the zoning administrator's determination was that it is currently being used as a motor vehicle storage lot.
Yep. Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. I have a follow-up question, maybe a little more specific than what Chair Perry had asked, but I think in the same vein. Are we allowed to contest the determination of the zoning administrator as part of this decision, or are we determining whether or not the nonconforming use rights exist or don't exist on the basis of it being out of a motor vehicle storage facility?
Chair Perry, Vice Chair Softly, you are not determining the use today. You are determining whether they have rights to a given use. And those rights would either be, if for the applicant, the rights to the motor vehicle storage, or it could be rights to the, what we classified as the contractor's yard, and that they had not lost rights during that interim period. In a sense, kind of a rebuttal. Most of what we see before here isn't necessarily a new, most of what we've seen before the Board of Adjustment isn't a new certificate of nonconforming use. Usually what you see is a rebuttal of abandonment, where everyone agrees what the original use was, and then we determined that it's lost rights and it's up to the applicant to prove that they, through clear and convincing evidence that they lost, that the reason that it was vacant for a given amount of time were beyond their control. So I guess if I'm answering it hopefully correctly, that's all we're looking at today. What rights do they have for those two uses? And not whether or not the old use was a contractor's yard or the old use was automobile storage. Because they are two different uses in our code and have been two different uses in our code for decades. And so they do. I hope I answered the question. I don't know if you have any additional clarity I can.
You did. I mean, the reason I ask is I'm looking at the photo from April of this year, and I can see that there's a A-Star concrete truck parked in that yard. And so in order to help avoid confusion, I mean, are we parsing the parcel down to a percentage of use for A and for B, or are we limited to the determination that was made by zoning staff in that this is clearly motor vehicle storage. It is no longer contractor yard.
And I'll answer that, Vice Chair Softly, and then we can let Board Member Grants-Korsch ask a question. It's a little bit more complicated than that in the sense that you can parse it out because you can have multiple principal uses on a property. So it is entirely possible, should the board find that they have maintained rights to a contractor's yard, that one company, that particular one, might be still a lawful nonconforming use, but not the other portion, something along those lines. You can get that granular. It's not completely an up or down on that, because what you're determining here are what are the clear and convincing rights that you see? Did they establish the rights to automobile storage when they were lawfully able to? Did they maintain the rights that we know that they had at one point for the contractor's yard? So those are essentially the two questions before you. Have they maintained their contractor's yard rights, and do they have rights to motor vehicle storage?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
To follow up then, I want to be really clear because that's why I asked the question. I have seen those contractor-type equipments on that site, but I've seen a plethora of the cars. So to me, that is a split. So going by his own testimony, if 20% of the yard is used for contractors' equipment and 80% is used for the 11th hour, or I shouldn't say the company, sorry, the storage of vehicles, because that's what it clearly is to me, we could separate those two pieces and say that 20% is acceptable the 80% is not.
Chair Perry, Board Member Grand Squash, yes, you can say each individual, it's not necessarily a percentage, but the individual use, you could say one has been maintained and one is not.
If you'll allow me to jump in, just of an extension of that, one of the slides I had, the context was about changes of non-conforming use. And again, a motor vehicle storage lot is not permitted in the current zoning district. It wasn't a permitted use in the previous I-1 zoning district. There would be an option if hypothetically, if they had effective non-conforming rights to a contractor's yard that continued through December of 2022, they could apply for a change of non-conforming use, which is a different type of land use application. It goes to the Planning Commission, but that would be an option for them if they had effective non-conforming rights at that period. Again, staff's perspective so far has been that they did not have effective non-conforming rights, but this also is kind of an extension of the line of questioning from before.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Mr. Kohlhaas for that clarification. I should have brought that up as well, that, if you do find one, they do have the ability to apply then. However, there would not be, should you find that there's not any sort of non-conforming rights related, that they had been lost, their only route then would be to appeal the decision of the board to the city council.
Okay. So as I said, the public hearing is closed, so is there further board comment on the matter? Yes, Mr. Johannesson.
Thanks, Chair Perry. From the evidence I've seen, I do feel like there has been contractor equipment stored on the site, whether it is a 20% versus 80%. I do see that. So I don't believe that use is expired, but I do believe the 80% use of stored vehicles is obvious too. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks for those comments. Anyone else? Mr. Softly?
Thank you, Chair Perry. I agree. It seems pretty clear that there is at least some continued use, or at least there's a photo of use in April. Whether that use continued without a one-year gap, I don't know. It's entirely possible that there was a one-year gap, but we've heard testimony today saying that they've had monthly checks paid every year for several years from A-Star Contractor, A-Star Concrete, and I'm inclined to believe that at least that user would meet the definition of a contractor's yard and carry forward the non-conforming use rights that exist there. That said, there's an awful lot of use on the property that I think staff is correct about and does not meet the code, does not have any right to use on the property. And there are no non-conforming rights for the outdoor storage uses. How we parse that up, I guess I don't know.
Anyone else? Thanks for those comments, by the way. Anyone else? I'd like to ask staff, given what we have heard already from the board, what is an appropriate motion to be considered? I mean, it sounds like there is some interest in approving the non-conforming rights certificate for the outdoor yard, but not for the motor vehicle facility, storage facility.
Ellis or staff from the clerk's office if they have anything they want to add here, but the staff recommendation is for denial, so this would be a notwithstanding staff recommendation, a motion to approve non-conforming rights to a contractor's yard use. And again, there are not the same legal findings as variances that you need to make, but you should articulate some findings and what is the basis for seeing that those rights are met. And I don't know if it would be appropriate to also have a part of that being that you don't find that there are non-conforming rights to a motor vehicle storage lot, to clarify that piece of that as well. I'm not sure if there is a good way to kind of separate those, but that is what is on the table before you, I think, if I'm hearing from the board correctly.
Yeah, Chair Perry, if I may clarify, Mr. Kohlhaas is correct. So it would be something along the lines of notwithstanding staff recommendation, the Board of Adjustment finds, for the following reasons that there will, I guess I'll go back. Notwithstanding staff recommendation, the Board of Adjustment grants a certificate of nonconforming use for the contractor's yard. Sorry, thank you. And then, but, something along the lines with a separate clause, but does not grant a certificate of nonconforming use or finds no certificate of use for the automobile storage, something along those lines, however you would like to wordsmith it.
So I would say that those people who are thinking in terms of that, you need clear and convincing evidence. So the fact that something appeared in a picture, to me, is not clear and convincing evidence. The testimony that the yard is used 20% as a contractor's yard is not clear and convincing evidence to me either. I think the bar is a little bit higher than that. And so it would be incumbent on the motion maker to provide for that evidence. Yes.
I am not convinced that the non-conforming rights of the non-conforming use of the contractor's yards have been satisfied. I think that there's been some lease activity, there's been the appearance of this use, but I don't know if it's strong enough to actually grant the rights, mostly because it appears as though the future use of the site is not actually going to be contractor's yard. And I know that's not what we're considering and that those are wrenching it, but to be granted a non-conforming use for something that you are not primarily doing or not primarily using doesn't really seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. Instead, the route that was mentioned, sort of applying for non-conforming rights of the vehicle storage, seems like it makes more sense. And how you would get to that and how we got here notwithstanding, but I'm just not completely convinced that the non-conforming rights of contractors' yards should be granted.
Thanks for those comments. Yes, Mr. Kohlhaas?
If I may, Chair Perry and Board Member Smikarova, just a reminder that if you're referring to the change of non-conforming use application as another route to establish rights to a motor vehicle storage lot, that is only an option if they have ongoing non-conforming rights to the contractor's yard, which is something that the board may or may not grant today, depending on your decision. But if the board decides that if they do not find that, or they do not grant a certificate of non-conforming use for a contractor's yard, they do not have that option to apply for a change of non-conforming use for a motor vehicle storage lot unless they were able to identify effective non-conforming rights to some other use, which is not something that has been not something I have been involved with discussions with. Just want to clarify that.
Ms. Grant-Korsch?
I'm curious what you think is viable. I agree, the 80% comment that was thrown out isn't necessarily accurate. But I am concerned because I looked at the photos, and after driving by it numerous times on my way to Home Depot, this is used by construction trailers and has been, according to these pictures from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2020, 22. They are there. So what would determine what would you think would be proof of that other than these photos?
So
that there is a portion of this property that is used for contractors' storage, a portion. I don't know what that is, but.
it's for contractor yard?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
for contractor yard, yeah.
So it's not up to me to make that decision alone. That's something that the board has to collectively decide. I'm just saying, I find it, that it would not be a clear and compelling argument, clear and compelling evidence, if there wasn't something like leases and checks and things like that to show that it was used like that, rather than some photos taken
Okay.
spot check.
Okay, do we ever go on pause on any of these kinds of things and ask for more documentation?
That would be something that I really think would be part of an appeals process and not part of our process itself.
Okay.
If I may, Chair Perry, Board Member Grants Korsch, the board could vote to continue an item to a future cycle, but as Chair Perry said, this is also the type of thing that is often pursued as part of an appeal if that were something that made sense given the board's decision and if the applicant were so inclined.
Mr. Johannesson?
I think hearing that information, then I'm thinking that then to get that evidence that he presented today in front of an appeal would then, to me, add that information, I guess, to that board or that entity that reviews that appeal.
Yep, and that is the city council, is the appeal body.
Right, so if he would be able to present that information to that body and show that he had the leases for the contractor yard use and the continuous use of that, then I guess to me, I hate to push the ball down the hill more, but I think to me, then that would allow them to present that to that entity and prove then that they have been able to keep the use.
Thanks for those comments. Does anybody want to make a motion? Yes, Mr. Johannesson.
I think sadly, I'm gonna make a motion to approve staff's findings and deny the application.
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to go on record that I will be voting against it, but I actually believe that I'm concerned and very disturbed by the amount of vehicles that are being stored on this property, and I'm glad it's being brought forth, and something needs to be done to prevent that from being done. But I'm going to go back on what I said earlier, that I know that just from being in the neighborhood, I know that it is used as construction storage, and so I think it's unfortunate that we're kind of we are pushing the ball down the road, but I just want to let you know that that's what I'll be doing, so.
Thanks for those comments. Any further comments on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Callahan.
Aye.
Grants Korsch.
Nay.
I'm sorry, that was nay? Okay, thank you. Johannesson.
Aye.
Softly.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Aye.
That's 4 yeas and 1 nay.
So your request is denied, and you can talk to staff about what your options are. You've already heard me talk a little bit about what they are. You can appeal the decision of this body, and that appeal goes to the city council. Thanks for coming down and testifying. I appreciate it. Next on our agenda is the adoption of the draft January and February 2024 council transition calendar. Usually, we wait a cycle before we make a decision, but I think in this case, since it's not the full calendar, and also because people have had a chance to look at it beforehand, usually it's handed out and we like to take a little bit of time to look at it, but it's been published for us and for the public, so I think we can go ahead and vote on that tonight. How do people feel about that? Okay. So with that, I would say if there could be a motion to adopt the transition calendar.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any against? Indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes, and we have approved the draft transition calendar. As I talked about at the beginning, and we amended the agenda, we're going to get a little bit of a presentation about where we're going to be in 2024. I don't know if it's all of 2024, but where we're going to be in 2024 for the majority of it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Perry and board members. So I'll add just a tiny bit of context about the calendar
And
too.
maybe, I didn't introduce you.
Oh, hello. I'm Ken Daler. I'm the manager of Legislative Support Services in the clerk's office. So yeah, I'll add a tiny bit of context about the calendar too that we shared at the last meeting. With the elections yesterday, we expect the new council to have its first organizational meeting in January, on January 8th specifically, and at that point, they will adopt a calendar for the year. Once they do that in mid-January, late January, depending on the meeting cycle, we'll come back to present a full calendar to the zoning board to adopt for the year. But regarding the meeting location, I can't remember if this has come up to this body before, so to prepare you for next year, and actually even later this year, as of December 7th, I believe, this, basically the third floor of City Council of City Hall is going to be unavailable to the public for essentially the entire year of 2024. December 7th will be our final city council meeting of the year in this space. They are doing an entire remodel of this floor. City council chambers will remain mostly unchanged. There'll be a few minor tweaks, but the rest of the floor will change. The mayor's office, city council clerk's office will all be moving to different spaces on this floor. What that will mean, though, for the Zoning Board of Adjustment, we are creating a temporary council chamber in the Public Service Center, which is the older building that the city used to use, that the city does still use, that is kitty corner north of City Hall. We are creating a temporary chamber on the second floor of that building, which used to be Development Review, right? Third floor. Right? Okay. Third floor on the Skyway level of the Public Service Center, which is 250 South 4th Street. We will be using that room is getting close to final right now. It looks great from what I've heard, but we will be able to still have our meetings there, accessible to the public, the same or slightly more space for people to attend. We'll also have an overflow room, and the meetings will continue to be broadcast while we're there. There will, however, be a little transition period before we're fully able to move into that space. So your final meeting of this year, which is scheduled for December 14th, we are actually going to be going into the Public Service Building, which Chair Perry, you'll recognize from your Charter Commission meeting just a couple weeks ago. We will be using room 100 in that building for the final meeting of the year for this body. I think there's also a strong likelihood that we will use that space for the first meeting of January, maybe even the first two meetings of January, simply because we want to ensure that the Public Service Center is fully ready to go. And because public notices need to go out ahead of time for these meetings, we want to ensure that we don't have a change of address after those public hearing notices go out. So you will find that we have 1 to 2 to 3 meetings in the Public Service Building, which is south of City Hall, before we fully transition for the year of 2024 into the Public Service Center north of City Hall. Right now, the plan is that we will be there for 1 year, likely returning to City Hall at the beginning of 2025.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
We have a meeting on December 28th.
We do not. Nope. December 14th is the final meeting of 2023. And then our next meeting will be the first meeting in January that's on the calendar you just adopted.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are either of these other spaces as cool as this space?
No. No.
Room 100 is definitely not as cool.
No, it's newer and it looks, I mean, that building looks great, but it's not as historic as this space.
Yeah.
Will you be including maps in our packets or email ahead of time, just so that we know which building, room, center, whatever that we're in?
Yes,
Great.
I have a short map that I give out to new council member or new commissioners, new board members, laying out where City Hall is in relation to the trains, the light rail station and the Hoff parking ramp. So I'm planning on expanding on that so that you'll have all those forms of reference of like where City Hall is in relation to the Public Service Center, the Public Service Building, Hoff. I'm also finding out whether there is a tunnel that connects Hoff to the Public Service Building, which is the old building, but Center, excuse me, thank you. This is why I say it. 250 South 4th Street. But it goes through the federal court building, and I'm not sure, we're finding out what it'll take to get access through there after hours for these meetings. So that's to be decided.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.